All right, everybody, welcome. My name is Julica Herman de la Fuente, and we'll be introducing ourselves a little bit more in just a minute. First, I just want to invite you all to take a deep breath. In fact, I'm going to invite you to take 3 deep breaths. One to let go of the excitement of arriving into this webinar. 1 deep breath to let go of the things that will happen after the webinar. And 1 other breath to be here now together. Mirna is going to launch us with a beautiful poem. Take it away, Mirna.
Hi, everyone. I am reading a poem and begins thus. This is the year that squatters evict landlords, gazing like admirals from the rail of the roof deck or levitating hands in praise of steam in the shower. This is the year that shawled refugees deport judges who stare at the floor and their swollen feet as files are stamped with their destination. This is the year that police revolvers, stove hot, blister the fingers of raging cops and the nightsticks splinter their palms. This is the year that dark-skinned men lynched a century ago return to sip coffee quietly with the apologizing descendants of their executioners. This is the year that those who swim the border's undertow and shiver in boxcars are greeted with trumpets and drums at the first railroad crossing on the other side. This is the year that the hands pulling tomatoes from the vine uprooted the deed to the earth that sprouts the vine. The hands canning tomatoes are named in the will that owns the bedlam of the cannery. This is the year that the eyes stinging from the poison that purifies toilets, awaking at last to the sight of a rooster loud hillside, pilgrimage of immigrant birth. This is the year that cockroaches become extinct, that no doctor finds a roach embedded in the ear of an infant. This is the year that the food stamp of adolescent mothers are auctioned like gold doubloons and no coin is given to buy machetes for the next bouquet of severed heads in coffee plantation country. If the abolition of slave manacles began as a vision of hands without manacles, then this is the year. If the shutdown of extermination camps began as imagination of a land without barbed wire or the crematorium, then this is the year. If every rebellion begins with the idea that conquerors on horseback are not many-legged gods, that they too drown if plunged in the river, then this is the year.
Thank you so much, Mirna. That beautiful poem is Imagine the Angels of Bread by Martina Espada, for those of you who want to hear it again later. Very powerful. So welcome, everybody. My name is Julica Herman de la Fuente. I am a Unitarian Universalist lay community minister, and my gig is to do anti-racism education around the country with congregations and ministers, and I'm so lucky to be doing that work. I was invited by this wonderful team of folks to help out with facilitating, and in particular with this first webinar, to talk about anti-racism education tools and how we want to frame the work that we do. So I'm going to invite my co-panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how this came to be. Mirna, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. It's so good to see that there's so many of you on this call. My name is Mirna Orozco, and I am the sanctuary organizer for Church World Service. I'm really excited to be on this panel and to get to see all of the amazing people that are showing up to do this work in solidarity with immigrants and refugees. So thank you and welcome.
Hi, I'm Lucy Duncan. I work for the American Friends Service Committee. I'm the Director of Friends Relations, which basically means that I'm a community organizer for the Quaker community to support the work of the organization in immigrant rights and ending mass incarceration in all of the issues that we work on. I'm really excited about this collaboration and really believe that like anti-racism and walking this path is a core spiritual commitment of mine, and I think it's about being whole. It's about all of us being whole. And I'm really grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you, Lucy, and amen to the wholeness of this work. So the other person that I want to give a shout out and gratitude to is Hannah Hafter, who works for the UU Service Committee and who is running our chat and Q&A. Hi, Hannah. Thank you so much for your background support. We have a bunch of people helping us do this, and we're so grateful. Hannah, I do see that there's already some Q&As queued up, so I trust that you're going to somehow let us know if that's something that we need to attend to.
Thanks. So far, all the Q&As have been technical details or introductions, so I've been getting people the answers they need to work.
That is so exciting. I just want to do this in Teams forever. Thank you so much. Okay, so some introductions about how this came to be. Well, actually, first of all, let's just take a moment to acknowledge all of the folks who are celebrating May Day, who marched, who have been showing solidarity in this important day that recognizes the importance of labor and of unity. And let's also take a moment to shout out and recognize the Pueblos Sin Fronteras people who are working with the migrant families who are at the border as we speak, claiming their need for asylum and not going quietly and really pushing the issue. We are with them in spirit. This work is so important. We're so grateful for everyone who is doing this work in their way. And so let me just tell you a little bit about how this came to be, and then Lucy will add a little bit more, and then we'll get started. So basically, folks from both the Friends world and from the Unitarian Universalist world and from the Church World Service, we were all noticing this need to support folks in sanctuary and accompaniment work, and we were noticing the importance of supporting this work in a way that is actually the most effective, because sometimes folks come in with really wonderful intentions, but not necessarily with everything that they need to do this effectively. And so in collaboration and in conversation with the folks who are on the ground organizing, we came up with this idea of a 4-session webinar that walks you through these different processes. Of these webinars, this first one is going to be the most quote-unquote academic. It's going to be the most oriented to tools. The rest of the webinars are going to be much more practice focused. We're going to have real life stories. Hopefully we will have some organizers joining us in these conversations. But for this particular webinar, I'm kind of your organizer in the sense that I'm the one that has been doing anti-racism education for a couple of decades. And so I'm going to take the lead in this webinar and share some tools with you. And Lucy and Mirna are going to join me in conversation around how this plays out for them. And then we will engage your questions. Lucy, what else would you like to add about this and how it came to be?
Yeah, Lori Kamala and I work a lot together on Sanctuary Everywhere, which is really the idea of making communities profoundly safe. And there's a vision behind this, which is that what if everyone who was impacted by injustice, if there were a nonviolent army of people standing in the way of that injustice. And that's what we're trying to build, is really that the capacity of that nonviolent army, but to do it not out of a savior complex, not out of a like I'm here to fix anything, but really in a way that is following the people that are impacted, understanding that they know best what solutions will work for them and what kind of support they need. And that there's a lot that gets in the way of us as white folks being able to do that, and allies with more privilege. And it's really, really important that we sort of look at ourselves as we do this work. And so I think that's a really, really important aspect. And we really know that on this call, it's not only white people, but we will be focusing it a little bit on that way. But we have a vision of creating a resilient and powerful community that can stop the injustice that's happening every day to our immigrant brothers and sisters, to Black folks, to people who are really impacted by injustice. And so that's really, and this comes out of that sense, and it's been a powerful collaboration to sort of, to work together to say, here's a need we see, what can we do together in a way that's very, very much following the lead of people who are impacted as we develop this, to provide some tools and some concepts and skill people up in being able to do this well.
Thank you, Lucy. Yes, and I want to speak specifically to that point about the identities that we all bring to this work and how that can shift and impact our experience. So this webinar is about whiteness and about how whiteness gets in the way. Now, it is my intention and my hope that that doesn't mean that it won't speak to other people of color in the room, to other immigrants. Mirna and I were having a conversation recently about how we're both Mexican immigrants, and we find white supremacy culture playing out in our lives all the time, and we're not even recognizing when that's happening. So I'm very hungry to hear from you all feedback about what we can be doing differently or what else we need to add. Bring it to your question and answer to the question and answer box if you want in this moment or in your feedback process. The other thing, I don't know if I already said this in this introduction, I think I said it earlier when we were welcoming people, but this is a pilot. We are running this as an experiment, as a pilot, and we really need your feedback to make it better. It's our intention to do it again in the fall and to somehow continue propagating this information, and we always want to make it better. We want to treat this as a learning laboratory. So we welcome your perspective, your questions, your observations. Thank you very much for extending grace to us as we figure all of this out together. Mirna, Lucy, and I feel really strongly that if we do our job well tonight, then we will have learned something and we will have gained something, and it's not about us being the experts and bringing everything to you. So thank you all for being here, and I think it's time to get started. Do you think so, Lucy? Yeah.
Definitely, definitely.
Take it away.
So we want to really emphasize the fact that this is this process is both about action and reflection, and that if we leave some of the reflection out, or the developing of relationships, or the support of really looking inside and looking at ourselves, and really doing this as a spiritual practice, we're leaving out a really important part that makes us really effective, that makes us able to show up in a spiritually present way, in a way that's conscious, in a way that's much more awake. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with a reflective moment, and we're going to have a journaling exercise. We want to begin with having you really take a moment of silence and really looking inside and journaling. And what we want you to do is we want you to maybe take a moment of silent reflection, but then after that, once you put your pen to the paper, we want you to just write in response to these queries, and just write what comes up to you, what comes at the top of your head. Don't edit yourself. We're one of the markers of white supremacy culture is perfection. We don't want perfection. We want you to just let it out, really see what can be surfaced as you just let things come as you think of them. So we want you to respond to these 3 queries. I am called to racial justice because, this is essential spiritual work because, and what I hope to learn and become as I do this work is. And we're going to give you 5 minutes we're going to hold some silence and some space. And we want you to really take this time. And if you're in a group, really take the time to really do this and hold the silence as well. And really take the time to write for yourself. So we're going to take 5 minutes and go ahead. And we'll hold the silence. Wonderful. So I imagine that that some of you could use more time, and hopefully some really some insights that you may not have thought might come up were there. I encourage you to use this kind of practice ongoing through the course. It's a very helpful way to sort of ground in yourself, ground in your own thinking, to be able to see your own reflections. And if you like, in your groups, as you do homework together, you may want to share what you wrote. I think that certainly no one is asked to share if they don't want to, but it may be another way that you want to use this. So I'm going to pass it back over to Julika.
Thank you, Lucy. All right, so one of the things that I want to offer you as an idea about doing our racism work as a spiritual practice is that it's not so much that we change what we're doing or the tools that we're using, it's how we engage the work and where we situate it. So I think many of us do this work and stay in our heads, try to understand it, try to make sure that we can explain it to other people. It's not as effective spiritually if we stay up here. The thing is to bring it down into our body, into our heart, into our gut, so that we're recognizing how is this impacting me and my brethren, my people? How is this an opportunity to do some faith development work? So we're about to introduce you to some tools, and some of you who have been doing this anti-racism work will be like, well, this isn't necessarily new stuff. I know this stuff. And some of you will be like, oh, this is new. And that's okay, because we're all developmentally in different places. In fact, we'll talk about that in a minute. But in order to make it spiritual work, it's where you take it. It's what you do with it. And one of the ways that you can recognize that there's an opportunity for you spiritually is if you have a strong emotional response. If you feel like, that doesn't make sense, I don't understand it, then you know that you're in your head. But if you have a strong visceral disagreement or a defensive reaction, then you know there's an opportunity there, something's up. So I just wanted to share that as a frame. And now I'm actually going to take a moment to lift up a prayer to the fairies of technology who have so far smiled on us. And every time I have shared my screen, it has worked, and it's going to continue to work. Thank you. Yes, please. So I'm going to share my screen again and share with you that over the course of the next hour and a little bit, we are going to be sharing some tools with you, and there's 3 buckets that we've put these tools in. So the first bucket is the bucket of identity, the bucket of our own experiences, our own lived experiences, our own social identities, who we are and what we bring to this work. The second bucket is talking about what happens when we look at this systemically, not just about our own selves, but about the system. So what are the systems that we are working with and against? And then finally, how do we want to be when we do this work? What is the come from? What is the energy that we want to bring to this work? And so again, this webinar is an introduction to anti-racism tools and ideas that hopefully will then play out in the future webinars when we focus more specifically on sanctuary and accompaniment. But the way that it's going to work is I'm going to share some basic ideas, the model, and then Lucy, Mirna, and I are going to engage in conversation and bring it to a place of experience and how we make sense of this. And then if we have time in each of the buckets, we have 20 minutes per bucket, then we will entertain some of your questions as well, which Hannah will feed to us. So let's get started and jump into the first bucket. There's three things that I want to share with you in this bucket of identity. And the first one is just the idea and the understanding and the importance of intersectionality. So it's not just about our race and ethnicity and the way that we experience racism, whether we're white or a person of color, but rather how all of our different identities, our sexual orientation, our gender expression, our temporarily abled or disabled bodies, whatever it is that's happening in our lives that informs our experience of society, all of these things matter. And it's important for us to have an awareness of how those things connect and to bring some information from this particular target identity into this particular privileged identity, so that if I know that what it feels like to be excluded as a trans person and I'm white, then maybe I can lean from that experience and bring it to understand what some of my brown and Black siblings are experiencing, for example. I think the other thing that's tricky is that most of us are encouraged to think more about how difficult and painful it is from our target identity rather than from our privileged identities, because privilege doesn't feel like privilege. Privilege just feels quote unquote normal. And so as we do anti-racism work, much of the work that we need to do when we are in collaboration with other communities, and particularly when we're working with communities of color and leaders of color, is to start going to the balcony and noticing what we have named as our way of doing things that may not in fact be the way that other people experience the world. So that's one piece that I wanted to share. And connecting to that is the next tool that I want to share with you, which is the iceberg concept of culture. I'm going to share my screen again to share this image with you, which if you Google iceberg image of culture, or iceberg concept of culture, sorry, you will see a variety of different options. Some of them have polar bears. This one has little birds, very cute. And I recognize that this graphic has a lot of words, and I don't want you to get lost in all of the different words, but rather I just want to invite you to consider the big picture, which is the idea that the majority of culture is below the surface, just like an iceberg. So the surface culture, food, dress, music, dance, literature, games, celebrations, those are easy to talk about, easy to share or to explore. The emotional load is relatively low. What I really love about this model, which by the way was created by Edward Hall in Beyond Culture 1976, what I really love is this information that we have on the left side of the iceberg, where we understand that much of the culture is unspoken rules. We don't talk about it. We don't acknowledge it as important. And even below that, there's even some rules that are unconscious. We don't even know that this is some way that we are engaging in a cross-cultural conversation and struggling. And so, for example, definition of obscenity, how we do problem solving, patterns of group decision making, definition of insanity. This is really interesting, and it's looked at differently from different cultures. And so if we are not aware that we are bringing this whole underwater package to an experience or to our anti-racism work, then we're already setting ourselves up for failure. So I want to invite, wait, no, I don't want to invite. I'm going to share one more model, right, Lucy and Mirna? I'm going to share one more model. Yes, you're nodding. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to share one more model, and then I'm going to invite a conversation with Mirna and Lucy. Nice machine. I click on you, and you do the thing. Yes, okay, thank you. All right, so this model is the Intercultural Development Continuum created by Mitchell Hammer based on the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity created in 1986. You can see that right there down below, the information. If you Google IDI or DMIS, you will find much information about this model. And what I like about this model and what helps us, so again, I want to remind you that we're in the identity bucket. So this is the first part where we become more multiculturally competent, more multiculturally aware. This is not, we're not yet to the anti-racism part. This is the pre-work, the work that we need to do in order to be able to be effective as anti-racist allies and advocates. And so this model teaches us that we are in the process of developing from a monocultural mindset to an intercultural mindset, hence the arrow. And as you can see, we go through different stages of denial, where we miss difference, we don't see it. Polarization, where we judge difference. Minimization, where we say, yeah, okay, we might be a little different, but it doesn't matter because we all bleed red and we're all human, and our differences are not important, so we're minimizing difference. Moving on to acceptance, where we deeply comprehend difference, and then finally to adaptation, where we bridge across difference and we actually change how we do things depending on who we're engaging with culturally. So I'm going to tell you what I love about this model, and then the part about this model that I do not love, and then we're going to talk about it with Lucy and Mirna. We're going to talk about all of this identity bucket. What I love about this model is the idea that we are all in different phases, that we are all in different parts of the process. And in fact, and we'll come back to this when we're discussing it with Myrna and Lucy, one of the funny thing that can happen, although it doesn't feel funny in the moment, is when you are, for example, in acceptance and you start working with someone in minimization. And especially when you have just graduated developmentally to a new stage and you hear someone speak from a stage that is where you used to be, you want to yank them into the stage that you are in. The way that they express themselves, the way that they talk about anti-racism work or racism as a problem can really irritate you, can really be difficult for you because you are developmentally in a different place. And so the opportunity and the challenge that we have here is to be gracious with each other, to stay curious with each other, and to recognize that we are all in a developing process. Now, the thing that I don't like, and I'm going to stop sharing so that we can start looking at each other as we get ready to talk. The thing that I don't like about the IDI and about the developmental model is that I think that even though it applies to both white folks and people of color in the sense that the tool works, like if a person of color takes the inventory and it will tell them you are in minimization or you are in adaptation or you are in polarization. But I think that the model is not sophisticated enough yet in understanding and explaining why people are where they are developmentally. And I think that this model of growth and continuum is more accurate for white people as they become exposed to other cultures or to other ways of being. Then they relate to difference in a different way and they grow. Whereas, as we all know, little kids of color are taught to code switch, are taught to adapt from the moment they go to school, even before then, from preschool, from babyhood. Like, people of color are adapting and surviving from the get-go in this country. And so the other thing that I would say is that if I encounter a white person in minimization and I'm coaching them, I'm going to encourage them to consider things that might help them shift to acceptance or adaptation, because I think that that growth is useful and powerful for them. But if I'm talking to an African-American sibling and they are in minimization, I'm going to let them be in minimization because they might be making that choice as something that they need to do for their survival. Because if they don't minimize difference, then they're getting targeted, they're getting pulled over by the cop, all of those things. So anyway, these are the tools that we use to think about, some of the tools that I like to use to think about the identity bucket of what we need to know when we do this work. And so, Myrna, I'm going to go first to you, and I'm going to ask you, have you noticed something in your work in sanctuary or in your own lived experience related to this concept of the iceberg model of like things not being seen or not being realized, or this developmental model? What are your thoughts around this part of our work?
Yeah, yes, I've noticed a lot of that stuff, and I'm really thankful that I get to see this because it makes me aware every time I kind of see this new image as someone who hasn't been necessarily through a lot of these trainings myself. I'm learning as we go, and it's really exciting to be able to recognize some of these things in my life and in my area of work as I hear you talk about them or as I see the visuals. So I think, we've gotten through a lot of them. When looking at the iceberg kind of graphic that is on there, looking at everything that's deeper where it comes to like cleaning, to like people's view of your cleanliness and how cultural differences affect that. And I was talking about a little bit about that before with both of y'all, how in doing this line of work, especially when we were asking people to offer sanctuary, and primarily the folks offering physical sanctuary right now are predominantly white congregations who are all saying, like, I need to have all of these things in order for me to be able to do this. And a lot of it relates to like making sure I have a decent shower or a decent thing when we're used to doing so much other things, and taking care of our cleanliness in sometimes different ways, right? And so that definitely pops up a lot in the work that I do and in the work that I've been engaging in. So those are some of the things that stand out to me, but it definitely just looking at the whole iceberg and the different things of what is seen and then what isn't seen is super powerful.
Yeah, thank you, Mirna. I hear you when you say the whole bathroom thing is like we have to have everything in place perfectly before we can take someone to the sanctuary, when it's like, no, really just a bucket. Like, can we just get some people safe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Lucy, how about you? What do you think when we look at these models?
So with the iceberg, I think it's really interesting to look at that, because one of the ways that I notice sometimes what happens is that when it's under the surface, sometimes it'll be something that some habit or some attribute or some way I think things should be done, and a big red flag for me is when I think, oh, that's exactly how it is. That's just how it is. That's the level at which you're at. It's like at the level of assumptions. It's at this deep root level the way that you see. And to become conscious is a really important part of that. And it's also like so deeply embedded in us, it becomes hard to become conscious. And that's where that deep work is really, really important, that you are like, oh, wait, there's actually another way to do this, to see culture, or to see a way of doing something or a way of being. And I think that's a really important aspect of that. And then with the intercultural development inventory, I think the point that you make about how it's different for white people and people of color is really, really important. And one of the things that I've noticed is that as I've moved, I haven't moved in a straight line, and that there's this process of going sort of back and forth, and that in my life I can find myself in certain contexts in minimization, and then in other contexts in acceptance, and it's really important that we both be kind of rigorous in growing, but also patient with ourselves in understanding that this is a developmental process, and that we need to find the ways and the mechanisms to support ourselves as we grow. And it may feel weird, like, oh wait, I thought I was in acceptance. What am I doing? Minimizing? What's going on? And that's part of the growth through these stages. And I think that's a really important part as a white person, to understand that you will move back and forth as you're moving forward.
Thank you, Lucy. I appreciate you naming that. That's exactly it. I see in the chat a request that I share the iceberg model one more time. So let me do that really quick and actually say one more thing that I'll let you, Mirna, and Lucy see if you want to say anything. And then if not, we'll bring Hannah in with some questions for this part of the conversation. So PowerPoint slide share, iceberg, no, click, nice machine. Nice, friendly machine. Okay, so here again is the iceberg concept of culture. And the one thing that I wanted to lift up to you is that when we think of doing anti-racism work as a spiritual piece, then we're looking at what we believe, our theology, how we make sense of how the world works, and also our ethics in particular. So what is good and right? What is moral? And so if we look at notions of modesty or ways of handling emotion, ideals of child rearing, again, definition of insanity, definition of obscenity, all of these things have moral components, have a part of us that we are either taught that this is good or this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. And we are bringing all of these things to interfaith experiences, to moments of cross-cultural difference. And if we're not aware that that's happening, then it's running us instead of us running them. So let me check my chat. Will these models be sent to us? Yes. Yes, okay. So anything else about the particular issue around morality or around anything that you want to say about that, Lucy?
Yeah, just like one of the ways that you can sort of test this is, and this is something that I notice like in Quaker institutions a lot, that if there's a real difference between who you say you are and what you say your beliefs or your theology is, and then how you're actually behaving. Like, Quakers believe in equality. We believe that's a testimony. But then you look at a lot of Quaker institutions and they're predominantly white. What's going on there? There's something that has to do with assumptions, that has to do with this iceberg level of who we really are and how we really believe what we really believe, or what assumptions we're actually operating from, that may be in opposition to who we say we are. And I think that's one real space for transition and revealing and some movement, is to look at the gap between who we aspire to be and who we actually are, and then trying to bridge that gap.
Thank you, Lucy. Mirna, anything you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of Lucy, there's somebody actually in the webinar that always says, as these white progressive congregation, we like to talk the talk, but we don't always walk that walk. And that just totally was coming to my mind about sometimes putting all of these things in place that allow us to kind of not be able to walk the walk when we do some of this work as some of these cultural differences. Well, I can't accompany this person because I don't speak the language. I can't do all of these things because X, Y, and Z. And there are usually things that make us or the people feel uncomfortable versus just being able to show up and do the work that's necessary. And a lot of it is rooted in some of these assumptions or different things. So just kind of want to call that out as well. And to hopefully some folks will be able to think about that as they go back home about, what are some of those things that have prevented me from just being willing.
Thank you so much, Mirna. And thank you, Hannah, for inviting questions. So yeah, I was about to go to you and say, are there any questions for us yet that you would like to lift up?
Yes, we have some really good questions so far. The first one is from Karen. Can you offer some tips for how a group might use these tools? So if people want to bring these tools back to their group, what might be a way for them to use this?
Yeah, that's a great thing. So I would start by, let's look at this together, and where do we feel curiosity? One of the really interesting ways of engaging a new tool is, where am I attracted? Where am I curious? Where am I feeling a pull towards? And simultaneously sometimes, where am I resisting? Where am I defending? Where am I pushing back? When I see a tool and my immediate response is, that's not right. That can't be true. That doesn't work. That's a really juicy place to be like, that's interesting. I'm having a really strong reaction to this tool. What is that about? So engaging in this tool, what do I notice about myself as I'm talking about this, as I'm reading this list of things, and gathering together in a group and saying, what do you notice? Or another possibility would be to take the tool, have a conversation about it, and then go out into the world. And this week, we're going to notice this. We're going to look for this pattern of behavior. We're going to look for this opportunity. And then we're going to come back next week and we're going to talk about what we noticed. And then we're going to compare notes. So that would be one way that I would recommend using these as with a group. What else you got for us? Sorry, Lucy, Mirna, do you want to add anything to that? No. Okay. Hannah, what else?
I have a great question here, but I'm not sure who it's from because it came from an email address. So sorry,
Okay.
to give a name. What are some strategies for ministers of color who are immigrants and face congregants who push back on immigration justice work because they think the minister is a one-issue minister or has a personal agenda? This is related to UU congregations who cannot see that UU ministers include immigrants, and that our calling is just as valid as if a white minister commits to social justice or immigration or any issue.
Yes.
She has responded that this is from Reverend Maria Cristina.
Maria Cris, thank you for that question. It's my in the moment response, and I think we could have an entire webinar on that particular question, Maria Cris, is that it's not the work of the minister of color to resolve this. It's actually the work of the white congregation to understand where they are developmentally and what's happening, not just for them as individuals, but as a group. What is the standard operating procedures in the congregation itself that makes assumptions and that sets up the relationship as adversarial between the lay leadership and the minister of color? I think that we are failing our ministers of color in Unitarian Universalism right now. I think that we have so many opportunity that we are not yet meeting, and that is our work. And so if they think that this is just your one thing and it's based on your identity, that is because they haven't looked in the mirror. Like, they haven't looked in this bucket to look at how they are engaging these issues. They are doing all of the projecting, which ministers always get anyway, but that is like double or triple layered when it comes to across race and when it comes to social justice issues. So that's what I got in this moment. I will be cooking on that and maybe bring back more later. But Lucy or Mirna, do you want to add anything to Maricris's question? Because that's a really tough question. What do you got?
So this is, I love how this is a conversation and we're like on the spot, and I hope you all are appreciating this too. Because as you were talking about that, I love the response, and two, I found myself kind of not minimizing, I don't know if it's a thing, but I'm over here trying to find like the commonalities and like, oh, where she could tell the congregation that she's like, it's an intersectional issue, or that it's like all of these things of like putting that burden on us to be able to like convince people that this is an issue that folks should care about. So I find myself kind of reverting to some of those things myself, right? Of like minimization, I guess you could call it, and the commonalities that you could bring into the other pieces. So I definitely found myself with a lot of that and find a lot of value in your response of making sure that it's not like the burden isn't on us to be able to take that on, but also that it is the responsibility of folks to be able to do that. And as immigrants, especially in this moment, I feel like there is so much part of that like emotional labor of like bringing people along with you, of like teaching folks about all of these things is put on us. And I find myself taking that on a lot. And I was like, oh, that was like my immediate first response. And really appreciate you naming that is not what we have to be doing at all times.
Thank you, Mirna. Lucy, you want to add something to this?
No, I think you both took this really well. I mean, I think that the focusing on the white congregants looking at themselves and their own patterns and like how deeply institutional their responses are likely to be, and like really thinking about that and questioning that and questioning their automatic responses to this minister is really, really important.
Thank you, Lucy. And in fact, that's a pretty good transition as we move to the second bucket. So I'm going to share two tools in the second bucket, which is about the systems. So let's share the screen again. The first tool that I want to share with you is the oppression matrix. You can find it in the book Teaching for Diversity and Social Justice, a source book, a wonderful book, first published in '97, and they've since had new editions. So yes, one of the people in the chats mentioned that if you wanted instant access, you could print the screen. You could do a screen capture while I'm sharing this so that you could have these, but we promise that we will send these to you. The oppression matrix is useful because it helps us understand the systemic level at which we are working when we are doing anti-racism work. So I'm going to look at this cube in slices. First, I'm going to look at the slices from left to right. So if you look at the left slice, that's the individual. Then the middle slice is institutional, and the right slice is societal, and those words are across the bottom. Then if you look at the bottom slice, we're looking at the unconscious, and the top slice of the cube is conscious. And then the back slice is attitudes, and the front slice is behaviors. So all of these things intersect. That's why this model, I think, is so valuable, because we can talk about unconscious, institutional, attitudes. For example, what Maricris was just asking about, I would probably name that they are having some conscious institutional behaviors. So front middle box, that is being influenced by the unconscious institutional attitudes, which are behind and underneath that box. And one of the things that I find this box really useful to explain to folks when I engage with folks who are really eager to do anti-racism work, and we start talking about the problems of racism, and they say, yes, but I am not part of the problem because I have a Black friend. And this is actually something that people say as a way of demonstrating that they have credentials, that they have done their work. And when people are doing that, what they're actually engaging is the top left front box, the institutional conscious individual conscious behavior. So the front top left box, that's where I have Black friends goes. And that is a good thing. I'm glad that people have friends across difference and across races. But that is not sufficient when we are doing anti-racism work. We want to look at the whole cube, at all of the things that are happening at different levels, and not just at defending ourselves individually and demonstrating that our conscious behaviors are good and right. And again, going back to that ethical piece, right? Also, as an aside, I encourage you all to look at the Harvard implicit bias test, because even when we have good conscious individual behaviors, we still have unconscious attitudes. We have implicit bias, and that's something that we need to acknowledge and engage with. So that's the oppression matrix. I find it really useful. We're going to move on to the next tool, which is actually a document that you will receive from us later because it's too much to share. It's too text heavy, but it is a document that analyzes white supremacy culture in organizations, written by Kenneth Jones and Tema Okun in 2001, looking not just at individuals and their work in becoming more multiculturally competent or even anti-racist, but at the organizations themselves, the way that groups function, the way that organizations function in their operating practices, in the way that the status quo maintains itself. And this document shows us how we privilege white ways of thinking and doing. So some examples are a sense of urgency, the belief that I'm the only one, perfectionism, worship of the written word, quantity over quality. There's only one right way. There's many in this document. It's really useful. And my invitation to you all is to read this document and then take it to your next church committee meeting or to your next, even to any organizational meeting, and watch how this is playing out in your organization, because I guarantee you will find it. And then you will also find it in yourself. Like Mina and I were talking about, like, oh my gosh, this is so embedded in me. Even though I'm a Mexican immigrant, I am still driven to this place of perfectionism because I went to school here in the States, and I was trained in this white way of thinking and doing, and I learned it well. So the other thing that's really valuable about this document is that it has antidotes. It has, here's how you could do it differently. Here's the other way of doing things. So this document is worth its weight in gold. I cannot say enough good things about it. And so I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can have a conversation about this. Mirna, what are you thinking? Talk to me. Maybe, maybe you need a more specific question.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so my question for you is, can you share one way in which you have seen this white way of thinking and doing play out in your sanctuary work and in your work with immigrants?
Yeah, so two big things that were coming up for me as you were talking about it. The first one has been around, well, is my own white way of thinking, right? But then the other one is what I've actually noticed. And so this also plays to like the immigrant dynamic of being in a space that is predominantly white. So most of, as I mentioned earlier, the folks that are in Sanctuary right now are in predominantly white organizations that are supporting them, and they're doing great work. One of the things that I found frustrating as an organizer now that also has privilege to know how some of these things should work, or at least I think I should know, is, for example, I'll be talking to folks about their cases and be like, so what do you think about taking on this strategy or pulling this? And they always defer, well, I have to check in with the pastor, or I have to check in with the organizer, who tends to be the white person that's been supporting them or giving them some sort of shelter, right? And that agency of being able to make on their own decisions and their own thing without first having to check with someone, because that relationship has really shifted, I think has been a really frustrating one for me, but also one in which I'm just like, how do we like shift that? And it's been where, you know, the pastors have been really awesome, be like, they don't have to check in with me. Like, that's just something that we as immigrants like sometimes take in, right? And then in other times it's like, yes, I need to know everything that's happening under this roof because it's my congregation and all decisions have to be passed through me, knowing that this person also has agency over their life, essentially. And so I see that play out a lot within the institutions and within the folks that we are working with, and so that's a big piece, right? And there are people in Sanctuary in a synagogue or in a temple, none that I know of in a mosque, but that's kind of just my vocabulary for folks that are asking about that language. And then in my own work, as I was mentioning, that kind of dynamic is, again, right? Sometimes I'm like, well, let me explain to you how this works, because you might not know. And I find myself doing that a lot with some folks as well. And it's based on that kind of culture of white thinking, of white supremacy that I've also come to internalize from my life, basically most of my life living in the US.
Thank you, Mirna, and thank you also for acknowledging that, yes, we want to use inclusive language, and this is not just for Christians. So thank you, Kayla. We will do better in naming different houses of worship and different ways of being with the divine. Lucy, what you got?
I want to talk about like the process, like how this shows up and how deep it is. So I was part of the Undoing Racism group of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting, a regional Quaker body, and we were doing a lot of work, but we had no organizational power and no like position in the organization. And as long as we were showing up and doing workshops and like talking about learning and doing that kind of thing, because Quakers are academic and they really want you to learn, we were fairly welcomed into the space. But the minute that conversation shifted to, actually, we need people of color and we need people with this kind of expertise in different places in the organization to guide different parts of the organization that were decision-making bodies in not making racist decisions, there was huge backlash. So once there was a request for power and for structural change, the backlash was enormous, to the extent that one Black Quaker who was a part of our group got basically marginalized and fired. So it's really, really important to understand how deeply embedded this stuff is and how deeply it will show up when challenged, and that we need to be ready. That's why we need to prepare ourselves and be open to the challenge, because it's a gift. It's a gift to say, no, we're not going to do things this way. We're going to find another way, and we're going to cede some power and give up a little bit of our own agency or power or our ideas about how things should be, so that we can have a really, truly multicultural and space.
Thank you, Lucy. Yes, absolutely. Hannah, we have about 5 minutes before it's time to move to bucket number 3. What do you got?
All right, well, we have some fantastic questions on this. I'm going to paraphrase one from Slabby, which is about the topic of sense of urgency. So they're saying, I feel a sense of urgency to listen to people of color and disrupt the institutions that are implementing racism and racist policies. Is this not the same thing as sense of urgency that comes from white supremacy culture? Is this called something else, or is it a sign that I need to dig deeper on why I feel so urgent to get our institutions to start listening to those that are harmed?
That is such a good question. Thank you, Hannah. So I think that there are many different types of urgency, and there's no doubt that this work is urgent, both urgent and important. People are getting deported, families are getting separated. Yes, there's urgency, and yes, the time is now. I think actually that the way that this document talks about sense of urgency is more about when we use the need for speed to accelerate a process that takes away from relationships or that takes away from involving other people. So we ourselves on this team creating this webinar had an experience of sense of urgency. We were originally going to do this webinar once a week for 4 weeks in a row, and we were going to do it right quick, and things were ready to go, and we had, our graphics were beautiful, but we hadn't had time to talk to the organizers. And it's like, wait a minute, like, what are we doing? And so that sense of urgency where we need to control the process and we need to make something happen, that's the one where you want to notice, why are we in a hurry? Relationships take time. Processes, attention to the process takes time. But that doesn't mean that this work isn't urgent. Anything else, Mirna, Lucy? No? Lucy?
I have one thing about process, because I think in the Quaker world, process gets in the way of really of answering the urgency of those who are saying things are happening to me, this is happening, I'm feeling racism every day in the Religious Society of Friends, I need support. So process is actually used as a tool, Quaker process. Oh, we're going to slow it down, we need to consensus, when actually in that case it's used to obstruct. And so it's really important, like, to really, I think that foregrounding relationships and foregrounding the voices of impacted, who are you listening to, whose voices really matter, and whose voices are you not listening to. That's really, really important.
Thank you, Lucy.
And before moving to the next question, I'll add, I am definitely someone who has embodied sense of urgency. And I had to come to terms with the fact that people have been fighting these systems for decades, for generations. People of color have been fighting this stuff for lifetimes. And so I can't just think I'm going to step in. Like, that's the idea that I can solve things, right? I can step in, and because I'm involved and I'm taking this on so urgently, I can change anything by having that attitude, right? I think it's understanding that this is a struggle of generations and we're all going to play in a role in it, but me being there or me not being there isn't the thing that's going to make the difference. And there's an aspect of urgency that has to do with thinking I can solve it.
Thank you, Hannah. Yes.
I am going to pass on the next question. How do we address the impulse to frame sanctuary work as a faith issue alone, separate from what we label as political, so that we're able to remove or not see the necessity of anti-racism work, or I'm going to add systems change as part of this witness?
I think
one thing I'll just quickly add is that I do hear pretty often the idea that we're doing sanctuary not as a political act, but as a religious and spiritual act, but we don't engage with the politics of it. Why is there something wrong with that?
Yeah, I think that in liberal circles, we have a very high value in being inclusive and in inviting more people into our spaces of worship and into our hearts. And so we have decided that politics are divisive. And so we try to dance around the political side of things by naming it a spiritual thing or a faith issue, because then we don't have to deal with conflict. I actually think that this is one of the white ways of wanting to avoid conflict. I can't remember who it was that said the personal is political. Audre Lorde, maybe? But I cannot possibly separate social justice work from faith from politics. They're all connected. And I think that we have disenfranchised ourselves by not leveraging our political systems in order to advance our moral values. I think that we have surrendered the high moral ground to the religious right, who has absolutely no problem saying this is good and this is the way and you all are going to hell and this, you know, and this othering. And we try to be in this relativist space where we're not claiming our political agenda. We should have a political agenda, and I think we should claim it. But that's Julika's personal opinion about this, which is the weird thing about being in a webinar. You're answering questions, and it's dangerous because maybe Lucy and Mirna disagree. Lucy, you're ready to say something? Go.
Well, I was just going to say that what it does is it denies the power, but denies your power. So what I find in Quaker circles especially, and I've done it too, like I don't want to think about, I don't want to talk about politics, but so we want to be nice, we want to be kind, we want to, you know, offer support to people that's not going to push the systems, but it doesn't acknowledge that actually we you know, as Quakers, as Unitarians, we actually do have political power, and when we deny it, we're actually, it's especially when there are people that have less political power that are asking us to support them, we're abdicating that power and not claiming our responsibility in shifting systems and shifting at that level of power. And so I think it's a really problematic construction, because we actually do have power, and it's partly, we can say, oh, we don't have to engage politically because we have power in the system and we're not going to be targeted by it. And so it's really abdicating and holding yourself up, your position of privilege, rather than really disrupting it.
Thank you, Lucy. Mirna, what are you thinking?
I mean, this is a question that comes up to me personally all the time, because the more you want to engage congregations to be willing, because I'm so desperate to sometimes find the space that will house somebody that needs physical sanctuary. Sometimes you're like, yes, it's not political, it's a faith issue. It is something that we have to do because it's our moral calling. But I totally agree, you know, personally, that it is a very political issue, and that we have to kind of reclaim that, and that fear that we have of the divisiveness of the conflict is something that I've personally struggled with as well, because in my effort, I'm trying to bring more folks into the work. And the more you think about it in that area, sometimes it can get a little hard. So this is a great reminder for me as well, that the personal is political, that if you're not willing, especially now, to go that extra mile and to be that line of defense, then maybe it's not the best for you to be engaged in that specific work of providing sanctuary to someone. And so, because it is a political issue, so I feel all sorts of things with this one, but definitely agree that that it's something that we have to kind of just reclaim.
Do we
Thank
have
you,
time
Mirna.
for one more question?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
If actually, I think that this is quite important. If you can just do like a 20-second answer.
Okay.
I'm going to paraphrase. Why is it important that we call this white supremacy culture rather than just white culture? Why is it not just the cultural aspects of white people?
Thank you. Yes, that is very important, because if we take the word supremacy out, then again we're taking the power dynamics out of the conversation. So white culture is supported and lifted up as the supreme way of being. That's why it's white supremacy. So white is better. Whiteness is better. And so supremacy is the piece that brings the differential experience of, if your culture or if your way of doing things is not the white way of doing things, then it is not as good, because white is the way that is good. Yeah? Mirna, Lucy, would you add anything to that? No. Okay. All right. So onward. Bucket number 3. How to best show up to do this work. So there's two pieces that I want to say, and in this particular area, I am actually going to separate from those of us who identify as people of color and those of us who identify as white. So for those of us who identify as people of color, I think that particularly in this time when we are feeling the added pressure of the political system just bearing down and things becoming even more challenging around issues of immigration and sanctuary in particular, it's very important for us to recognize when we are doing anti-racism work from a place that is triggered, from a place that doesn't feel centered. And for those of us who identify as people of color, our central work is to do self-care work. And yes, to stay in solidarity and collaboration with other of our siblings of color and with our white allies, but to really, truly, as Tarana Brooke said recently at a presentation here in Lansing, to curate joy, to notice what is it that we need to do to maintain our spirits and to maintain our capacity to be resilient, because we're in this for the long haul and this work is the work of our lifetimes. So for folks of color, I invite you to recognize and to start studying on PTSD and what are the PTSD symptoms, so that you can know when you have been impacted so much that you need to attend to this at a different level. Because so many of us are doing this work from a place of being triggered, and it's not good for us, it's not good for our movements. For white folks, we encourage you to look at the work of Robin DiAngelo. We shared, Lucy, did we share? We shared, right? We shared the video with you where Robin DiAngelo talks so powerfully about this concept of white fragility. So I'm going to do a very quick summary of white fragility and share with you some ideas that I have about this white fragility piece, and then open it up to Lucy and Mirna and to your questions. White fragility, by definition, as Robin DiAngelo teaches us, is what happens when white folks are challenged to see the world from a different place, and when they are first confronted with their own complicity or their own participation in racism as a white person, and their emotional response is of complete overwhelm. So Robin DiAngelo talks about a person actually having symptoms of a heart attack. Like, it was a really serious physical response that was happening, but it can also show up as what some people call white lady tears, which is this idea that it's so overwhelming to take in the pain and the difficulty of this work that we can't handle it as white folks, and we allow that to overcome us, but not just us, our groups and our processes. And I think that white fragility gets in the way of us showing up well, which is this third bucket that we're talking about. How do we show up well to do this work? But I think that we may have not been engaging this in a nuanced enough way. So I want to tease apart the feelings from the expression of the feelings and what we do with them. Because I have heard many white people berate themselves for having white fragility. I have seen many white allies hold back or censor themselves or shut down because they are working so hard to manage their feelings. And I appreciate that. That's right. That's good to manage your feelings and to pay attention, but not if it gets all the way in the way of you being able to be an ally and do this work with us. And so the place that I want to tease this apart is, of course, you're supposed to have feelings. This is a deep process. It's an emotional process. Racism isn't just something that we understand. It's something that we feel. And as we move along in this process of development and of awareness, of course, there's feelings that come with it. But the thing that you can choose to do is to not hijack the entire group that you are with in that moment because you are having these feelings and because you are overwhelmed. So if you are in the process of accompanying someone, or if you are offering someone sanctuary and all of a sudden you are overwhelmed by the intensity of something that you've witnessed, don't go to that person to ask for their absolution, for their love, for their support because you can't handle it. Go to your white sibling and say, help me out because I'm freaking out, and manage it, but allow yourself to manage it rather than repress it, which is, I think, one of the ways that we have been doing white fragility work recently is, I can't have this. I'm not supposed to be fragile. I am tough. I have no feelings. And already white people have been trained to be in their heads anyway. So if they're actually shutting their feelings down, that's not going to help. So that I do get a little soapboxy about it. I actually, white fragility is one of my things. Like I wish that we had more skillful ways of engaging this work. And I look forward to us being in another place around this. And Mirna, I'm going to go to you first. And I want to hear how you have experienced either the piece about folks of color needing to take better care of themselves, or examples of white fragility, whichever one you are called to speak to first.
Is like how I feel right now after that whole speech, because I think you're totally right. I mean, for me doing this work, it's heavy stuff, and for organizers too, it is really heavy. I mean, sometimes I'm in a space with folks, we have weekly calls with people in sanctuary, and sometimes it's just me holding the space for people to cry, and I get super overwhelmed, and I'm like, I don't need them to see me cry, because then they'll want to take care of me, and they're like the people directly in this situation that I'm not. And so I can see how that gets super overwhelming sometimes. And so we begin to engage or figure out ways in which we can better deal with that secondary trauma, because that is super, super real, and something that pops up in all of our work, and something that we have to be really careful. So I'm actually trying to introduce some of these concepts, because it's really hard. I mean, you're in there, everybody's desperate, people are crying, they're talking about loss, about how long they've been without seeing their family members. Somebody's son is about to graduate and he can't go to the graduation, and it's just all really tough stuff, and you're listening in and taking it in. And as people of color, like obviously I want to nurture, I want to help, and sometimes I also have to remind myself, yes, this is the work that I'm doing and I love it and it's compassionate, but I can't take all of the responsibility of fixing everything, because I physically and literally cannot do that. And so I think that's super, super important. And then the second part on having folks and white fragility, I've seen instances where it's like, oh, I need to process this, and somebody's in physical and emotional pain, and then they bring that on, and it's like, that's a lot. They can't, I don't know if it's probably a culture thing where it's like, I'm hospitable, I want to take care of you, I want to be able to provide that. And when you come, because you're also doing something for somebody or offering this space or doing something, there's that relationship. Sometimes I feel like I owe you and I need to take care of you and I need to walk you through this. And it gets really hard. I've heard it from both sides, right? Like, oh, I just did this, or oh, this happened and I don't know how to deal with it except for like taking care of them. And it's super exhausting for me and I don't know the proper tools to do this. So I feel like it's in both. So I'm really glad that we're talking about it now. It's all, as you mentioned, things that we're trying to figure out and that we want to do in solidarity with each other, because it is difficult. It's not always, nice and pretty and go to work. It's messy, it hurts, and it sucks sometimes, but I think reminding ourselves to ensure that we do the necessary work to care for ourselves, as people of color, and for making sure that we protect that that centeredness that we have as well is super, super important. So I'm really glad that that's also coming out on here.
Thanks, Mirna. Lucy, what about you?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that white supremacy does to white people is it puts us in service of white supremacy, and we have all these habituated responses that sometimes are feelings in service of upholding the system. And and as we become more anti-racist, our feelings become like more rooted, connected in compassion, connected in, for me, a really big moment was realizing what white supremacy had done for me and getting connected to the grief of that. But some of these things, that white fragility is really about about the assumption that white people's comfort is more important than the actual pain and lived experience and oppression of people of color. And that is something that's embedded in the system, and it's really, really problematic. And so the habituated responses, Robin DiAngelo says it really well in the video that we shared with you. She talks about the good-bad binary, and that after the civil rights movement, it became bad to be racist. But what that did is it was like any information about you are upholding the system, you are acting out of your racism for a white person, there's all this defensive shield about, no, I can't be that, I can't be that, and not an understanding that these systems are so deep, it's not our fault that we breathe them in, that we're operating from them, but we do have a responsibility, especially given our social location, to undo them and not to hold up this wall of, no, I'm not racist, but to understand that we can be good people and be deeply embedded in racist systems and be perpetuating them all the time and taught to do that. And so she talks about the good-bad binary and getting past that's something that's under the surface, that's operating all the time. And one of the things that's very, very powerful that I've heard her say in her talks, and it's also in that video, is she's talking to a group of people, and there are some people of color in the room, and she turns to them and she said, how many times have you talked to given feedback to a white person about the ways that they were acting out of their racism, and had that gone well for you? And all the people of color laugh, like, no, it's never, like, there's always defensiveness. And then she says, and can you imagine a world in which what you could give feedback about somebody acting out of the system, perpetuating things, and they would receive it and try to fix what they've done and move forward in a different way? And there's like this huge sigh of the people of color in the room, like, whoa. And one man said, that would be revolutionary. And I think that it's really important for us as white people to understand that receiving this kind of information about ourselves as a gift and as something that is helping us to grow and to be more in concert with who we want to be is so, so, so critical. And as I do this work, I have friends who will tell me, sometimes I act out of this defensiveness. Sometimes that can be the first response that comes. But I try to hold myself and breathe and really listen to what they're saying and receive it and understand it is a gift. They care about me. They think that I can actually hear it. It's an honor to be told, Lucy, this was racist, this thing that you did. And it helps me to grow, and it helps me to live more according to what I really want to be, and to live according to these anti-racist principles, and to be a more useful ally and a more useful agent of the change that I want to see in the world.
Preach it, Lucy. Thank you. Yes to all of that. Yeah. So, at the end of this time together, I feel like we're just getting into it. And now I really want to just talk and engage and go deeper. And there's some good questions. I see, Hannah, that you have one important question that you want to offer. So here's what I'm going to propose that we do. We're actually going to say the things that we need to say about the next webinar and homework and blah, blah, blah. And then I can stay on a little bit past 9:30 so we can take some questions after. For those of you who can't, you can always reference the recording later and just fast forward to the part that you missed. So does that work for you, Lucy and Mirna, if we do the closing piece and then we take a couple questions and maybe wrap up a few minutes past 9:30 so that we can entertain a little more questions? Give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you. So Lucy, you're gonna close things out. Do you want me to still share the Paulo Freire quote, or are we gonna skip it? You're muted, friend. Do it again.
Let's do the Paulo Freire. It's not going to take long to read, and then we'll go into the others. Yes.
Okay. Am I going to read it, or are you going to read it?
Either one. I'm happy to. You can read it, whichever works.
I want to read it because I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, read it.
Okay, I will. So let me share it so that you all can read along with me, because it is a long quote and I think it's very powerful. Certain members of the oppressor class join the oppressed in their struggle for liberation. However, as they cease to be exploiters or indifferent spectators or simply the heirs of exploitation and move to the side of the exploited, they almost always bring with them the marks of their origin. their prejudices, and their deformations, which include a lack of confidence in the people's ability to think, to want, and to know. Oppressors turned allies truly desire to transform the unjust order, but because of their background, they believe that they must be the executors of the transformation. They talk about the people, but they do not trust them. And trusting the people is the indispensable precondition for revolutionary change. I'm going to read that last sentence again. They talk about the people, but they do not trust them. And trusting the people is the indispensable precondition for revolutionary change. So that leads into our work on accompaniment and what we're doing next. So take it away, Lucy.
Yeah, so our next webinar is going to be really focused on learning the accompaniment, learning how to trust and not center whiteness or center ourselves as allies in this process. And so we'll really be diving deep into that. And this is a really key piece in dismantling oppressive systems, and that's what we're going to be working on. I want to talk about I think somebody asked a question about whether you're going to be connected with other people. We didn't have a chance to do that before this time, but we will be doing that work. There's going to be a survey for leaders so that we can be a little more intentional. Since there were so many people registered, it was harder to do that work before this time, but we will connect you. I want to tell you a little bit about the homework, and we, again, this is a pilot, so we're working this through and you're teaching us as we go. We're going to be sending a survey, so we're going to ask you how this one went and then what your hopes are for the future, and we're going to incorporate that. We've also been really intentional about asking immigrant organizers and other people who are impacted about what they need and us to be teaching. So that's another piece. So I'm going to tell you about the homework very quick. So 1 day a week, we want you to be real intentional and notice racial dynamics. Think about the tools you used, apply them, think about that, journal, talk to people, put some comments on the Facebook group that we invited you all to. There's different spaces in which we really want you to dig into this. White people maintain white supremacy partly through silence. So we want to disrupt that and get you talking about this, get you talking about what's going on. Once a week, we want you to watch a spoken word poem that we will send to you and take it in, and then also journal or reflect on the Facebook group. We want you to watch the Robin DiAngelo video if you haven't and reflect on that. We want you to read the white supremacy culture article, reflect on that. And then we're going to send you the white fragility article that dives down a little deeper into that, and we want you to reflect on that. And again, we have this Facebook group that you can do that many of you have already joined. Come in and join that. If Facebook isn't your thing, that's okay too. We encourage you to find partners and do this in group. And we really want you to try, if you're in a group, to meet at least once between now and our next webinar to really dive into this stuff a little more deeply. And we're going to have a poll at the end, but I want to leave some time for questions right now. And I'm so excited and grateful that you all are here. We're really trying to as I said, equip an army of nonviolent warriors for this work.
Thank you, Lucy. Yes. So Hannah, bring us some questions. Let's do about 10 more minutes. We'll go a little bit over.
Thank you. So one of the things that's coming up is the question of how does this all relate to sanctuary for immigrants? And what are the panelists' relationship to the sanctuary movement and doing the boots on the ground sanctuary work?
Great. So let's take it one at a time. Mirna, you take it first.
Yeah, so what I do as an immigrant organizer is I actually help and work directly with people at Sanctuary across the country. So we have weekly calls where I hold space and work with people in Sanctuary to develop strategies, tools, support group, resources, whatever it is that they need in their local communities, and also with organizers that are helping with their cases. So pull those folks together. We also do a lot of just tracking of the movement and support to congregations that are looking to engage in the work. So training, technical support, tools and resources. So a little bit of everything as it relates to the sanctuary movement as a whole.
Myrna, can you also add, in your opinion, why this work is essential for Sanctuary just as much as the logistics of how to host someone in Sanctuary are?
Yeah, so I think this is super important. I mean, I mentioned a couple of examples. I think it's the way that sometimes we show up to do this work and the way that it's happening as I'm seeing it across the country. For folks to be able to like unlearn some of these systems, as I was telling folks earlier, is super important just because of the dynamics that happen between people in sanctuary and the folks that are sometimes helping them that are super well intentioned, but sometimes kind of get in the way of how this work is happening. So talking about, you know, people being able to make decisions on their life and their agency and how that's been impacted by the organizers that have been, you know, wanting to help them, but essentially have really put roadblocks for them to be able to do something as simple as deciding what course of action they want to take on something that's going to impact their family and their life for the rest of their life is super important. So I think that this work definitely goes hand in hand. It's also important to realize that we're not asking for a charity, that's not what this work is about. And a lot of sometimes that's where this work comes from when we don't look at it from a racial justice, anti-racism perspective. It's also really important, and they play out in the dynamics of day-to-day sanctuary all the time. I mean, it's not easy work. And if we don't do this work to be able to do that from the right space, I've seen it get all sorts of crazy, and that's not what people need in the moment when they're seeking help and support and shelter.
Thanks, Myrna. So I have not been involved directly in sanctuary work, in part because my own citizenship process is in the process right now. And so I need to be very strategic and careful about how I engage in this type of work so that they don't deport me. So I'm in a transitional place. Hopefully, when the citizenship process is completed, then I will be able to engage more directly in the sanctuary work. I was invited into this from the Unitarian Universalist side, from the service committee, because I've been doing anti-racism education and anti-racism work for the past couple of decades. And so I came across, I think it was Hannah's radar first, and she invited me to join this conversation. So that's my involvement in the way that I'm involved in this project right now. And I would echo everything that Myrna just said about what happens when we don't bring the anti-racism lens to this work. I think that white liberal folks have unexamined savior complex that really needs to be addressed directly, that needs to be named and that needs to be handled in order for us to do this work more effectively than we are. And Lucy, somebody turned the light off in your office.
Somebody did.
It's time to go home, I guess.
Here, they turned it back on.
Okay, good.
So I would also add that thing about the savior complex is really, really important, because the truth is that our liberation is bound up together, and that white supremacy, you know, is a very comfortable cage, but it's still enclosing the hearts of white people all the time. It's still keeping us from being with and being in relationship to whole sets of humanity. It keeps us emotionally having a deficit. We as white people are screwed up a lot by white supremacy, and we may get lots of goodies. We may get doors that open for us, but still our hearts are really malformed as a result of this stuff. And so understanding that it's not about helping this person who needs me. It's really about our liberation being bound up together, and that I'm not really going to be free until this person is free too. And I don't want to live in a system where millions of people are getting deported or millions of people are being incarcerated and separated from me and apart from me. I don't want to live that way. And so I think it's really important to understand that my relationship to this work is mostly in teaching this kind of thing, how to be a companion and doing Quaker social change ministry. I mean, AFSC does a huge amount of immigrant rights work, and I am in proximity to it, but trying to teach allies how to do this well.
Thanks, Lucy. Hannah, what else?
I don't have any more questions here. If anyone wants to offer any additional questions or final comments before we finish up, I think we just have the closing poll.
Yeah, let's do the closing poll now, and then we'll offer a closing prayer.
Looks like Ready for More is the champion far and away. I'm going to share that with everyone.
Okay.
Great.
All right.
That's
Check
great.
that out.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
So you all will get an email probably tomorrow with the recording of the webinar, and you'll get a reminder about the next one, and you'll get the homework, some of which you've already gotten. And so excited that you are gathering together to do this work together. We need each other to live in a different world and to get there and to envision it and to do the deep work needed to make it real.
I invite you all to take a deep breath. En el nombre de todo lo sagrado y todo lo importante y de todo el trabajo de justicia que todos estamos haciendo, agradecemos este tiempo juntos, agradecemos la oportunidad que tenemos de seguir aprendiendo, de seguir creciendo, de hacer todo lo que es necesario para seguir en este camino de justicia y de luz. In the name of all that is holy to all of us, we give thanks for this work, for each other, for the community that it takes to stay in this work and to stay with curiosity and engaged with each other in the process of becoming and of following the light and following justice. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you so much, everyone. We look forward to engaging with you on Facebook and seeing you next month. Blessings, and see you soon. Gracias, Mirna. Thank you, Lucy.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, everyone.